All right. So today I will talk about coding in the age of AI. I've been a little bit about me. So I've been coding for about the last 8 years. Right. Currently, I work as a CTO at a startup for government technology, where we focus on building AI tools for different government agencies. But prior to that, I spent 4 years at AWS and 4 years at DoorDash as a software engineer. Most of my time has been focused working on front end. Over the past few years, I made a transition into stack, a full stack, and now I'm like a very heavy infrastructure guy. So I've been able to see exactly how AI has changed the way we code. I remember back when I started working at AWS, you're just coding all the time, right? There was like nothing you could use to help you do your work. You had to read thousands of documentations. You had to go to Stack Overflow. You had to ask other people. And, that was what development was, right? You were stuck in a problem for hours, sometimes even for days. And sometimes you didn't even know when you found the solution. And to be honest, a lot of the tools we use don't have the best documentation. For example, I've worked a lot with Pros Mirror recently, and these are their docs. They just tell you like all the methods they have, and it's like good luck, figure out what you're trying to do. So in the past, trying to figure out something like that, right, could take you days, could take you weeks, and sort of like AI has come and played a interesting role in how it changes the way we work. I know, you often hear that AI is going to take people's jobs, it's going to replace them, but I've actually found the opposite. I feel like somebody like me, that I've been working for almost 10 years now, I get to use AI to build a lot faster, right? Not as a crutch, or I don't know how to code, help me build this, right? It just helps me forget about the medial things. I don't know how to do something, I just go ask, right? Like, show me the documentation, all that sort of stuff. So, what is AI? And I'm not going to get super deep into the underlyings of it, but I will focus on kind of like the broad stroke of like, AI is something that can analyze information, recognize patterns, and generate responses, which for a lot of us, right, if I would say for me, I'm a developer, a lot of the tools that I use are very heavily documented. A lot of the use cases, like if you go to GitHub, I would do this when I was trying to implement something, I didn't know how to do it. I just go to GitHub, look up for a repo of whoever was building whatever I was trying to build, and just see how they implemented, just so that my mind could understand. And I usually focus on like a lot of the big open source repositories. There's really good examples, but now, I don't have to spend those 10, 20 minutes to be able to do that, right? I can have AI help me with those things. And right, for developers, this is a lot of the things it can help us with. It can help us write code, generate code, debug errors, accelerate learning, explain documentations, and suggest architecture. So like Josh was mentioning earlier when he was talking about the patterns that .NET brings, a lot of it is boilerplate. And that's kind of standard across all coding languages. You use Ruby, you use React, you use Go. All of them have some sort of boilerplate. Remember, in my job at DoorDash, we have we had like what we call like a backend for front end, which is basically maps everything you have in your microservices to like a centralized location, and then your front end can hit, so it's not hitting microservices directly. So that became our translation layer, and all that was plumbing. It was just take input, like call the microservices, gather the data, transform it from like gRPC to JSON, map types, send it to your front end to consume. In some studies that we did, it would take about 2 days to do all the mapping that you had to do just to set up a new endpoint. And as I was kind of like left that role, a lot of what we tried to do was we used a lot of generators, like code to like, we type a command and it would generate all that, like, I think it was like about 10 files of code that had to be generated just so that it could work, right? You still had to have your logic. Stuff like that has changed with AI. When you have these repetitive patterns, especially in mature code bases, where the patterns are already set, everybody kind of writes code the same, then your AI suddenly becomes more powerful at replicating all the patterns you have, and it's a lot easier, to go from zero to something. And this is kind of, I guess, everything I just talked about, right? So in the past, to build software, you had to spend months learning. You had to understand all the intricacies of your coding language, or every coding language is different. I mainly write like Kotlin, and Kotlin is like a flavored, watered down version of Java, and that comes with its own, knowledge frameworks. I've also do like JavaScript, HTML, TypeScript. All of those languages have like their own downfalls, and when you're barely learning how to code, those things can trip you up. If you ever written JavaScript, like it takes a while to jump over your mental barrier of what like this is, right? Like it's like one of the first problems people run into trying to understand what that means, and I feel like nobody can really tell you what it means. But yeah, and again, software, you needed larger teams, and you had very long development timelines. But now with AI, it allows you to prototype ideas quickly, learn new technologies faster, help debug problems, and it helps build products with smaller teams, which is something key for sort of like my current role. I work in a startup. We're about 5 engineers, and almost every engineer owns an entire vertical of the product, right? So it's like every engineer is building their entire app by themselves. So in larger teams, you would have like 4 or 5 people working on the same product, just different features. But in startups, it really shines because startups, I guess, by nature, you want to move fast and you want to execute quickly. I remember, I don't know if people still say this phrase, but it was like move fast, fail quickly. And that's what AI allows you to do. And this is where the prototype ideas quickly is really interesting, because in a lot of like the bigger companies, whenever you're entering a new feature, you spend at least a week or 2 writing a design document just to kind of figure out what you're trying to build and getting review and feedback. So it takes a while until you're actually starting to write code. But being able to prototype, right, you don't need the design document, you don't need anything, right? You just need the idea. You can start building, and you can kind of see like rapid feedback. And again, I mentioned on the idea of prototype, because once you start getting prototypes in front of people, then you can start seeing what's broken, right? Like, I don't like the way this looks, I don't like the way this functions. And it helps smaller teams a lot. Again, how compared to the bigger companies usually have a whole team of designers that by the time you have to code something, it's like, this is exactly what you have to code. And then you only focus on the technical details of it. But in smaller places, we don't even have a design system. Like, we don't have designers. It's just like, our senior leaders telling us like, I want this, and it's up to us to go figure it out. And this is where AI helps us a lot. And again, a lot of this stuff I just talked about. So this is where it really helps you, right? It helps you with boilerplate code, learning new frameworks. You can use AI however you want it, right? But I find that the most effective is to use it as a learning companion. If you don't know how to do something, again, whatever, if you want, you can go ahead and just not care and just build something, which is totally valid. But if this is something that you do as your professional career, right, you don't want to rely on like, hey, this is just AI, I'm going to let it go. And I'll admit, I do that sometimes, right? But I feel like I understand the foundation of everything that's being built, and it's not like, oh, it's just building random stuff. Debugging errors is really good. Like I mentioned, I work a lot in infrastructure now. We build all of our stuff in AWS. We use like Kubernetes clusters and like networking and security. So a lot of these errors are new to me, right? So it was really helpful just kind of like copying and pasting those errors into an AI model to guide me to like the right documentations, the right articles I need to read. And architecture, this is something that I feel a lot of people don't touch, right? I think architecture is usually reserved for the 10+ year people. You have software architects, you have like your staff engineers that do a lot of those stuff. So if you're a software engineer, when you come working into a company, you're just kind of building within the system, right? You're not building the system. And I think AI helps you, right? If you don't know how to build like a distributed queue, right? You could just ask AI, hey, like guide me on the most common patterns of a distributed queue. And in a matter of seconds, you can go from like not understanding what a queue is, or even like distributed means, into understanding like the major patterns. And this really helps with interviews and all that sort of stuff. And also, you don't have to rely on somebody that knows. I think like previously, if I wanted to learn about like a distributed queue, I had to find somebody that knew how to do that first. And I think it's just recent that companies started publishing like articles. And a lot of the articles are just to flex, right? Like how we handle scale and all of that. And a lot of them are not very technical. So the only way you would get like these high level ideas were like buying books, reading books. And a lot of people don't like to read like technical documentation. In the past, that's how you had to do it, right? You wanted to be better, you had to buy a book. You had to read it, understand it, and figure it out yourself. But now, this is something where like you could really get like supercharged and really learn anything you want. And here's kind of like let me take a step back, right? So like I mentioned, we shouldn't really blindly trust AI, right? I think there's like a good and bad thing to everything, right? If you're using it to like as a learning companion, it's pretty good. But if you're using it as if you're using it as a crutch, or trying to just get by trusting AI, it could like lead to pretty negative consequences, right? I feel like if you guys are on like tech Twitter or whatever, you often see like people wiping databases, like wiping Terraform state files, and right, it's a lot of the times like you just kind of ask yourself, you have to bypass so many security rules placed by these AI agents to even get to that position, right? So it's just kind of like fear mongering people of like, I don't want that to happen to me. I think if you use any of the major tools, like, I don't know, Codex, Claude, a lot of them specifically make you type like dangerously skip permissions, right? Kind of like letting you acknowledge that, hey, like what you're doing could be destructive. And a lot of them also provide you escape hatches. A lot of them have like security systems under the hood where you can specify what commands you always want permission to be asked for. And again, I mentioned skipping the fundamentals. I think AI is awesome. And you shouldn't use it to skip the fundamentals, but build stronger fundamentals. And over reliance on prompts, right? Usually, I guess this is like interesting, right? Because if you're new to what you're trying to build, you really don't have a foundation of like what is the process of building something. So it's usually like do this, do this, do that, right? But as you build that intuition in your mind, I ask you like, hey, can you build X? You have like a process, right? I need to figure out like a database schema. I need to figure out, what the UI is going to look like, and then you can like layer AI on top of that to help you more effective in those things, rather than like build X feature, right? Like that's way more ambiguous. You don't even know what's going to happen. But if you break it down into those things, okay, what do I need to do to build X? Then you're learning in the process. And again, going back to security, I think this is just that responsibility slide, right? Like you do become the owner of the consequences, whether you use AI for your personal projects or for your work projects, right? API keys, passwords, database credentials. Most companies don't even let you touch all of these, right? A lot of them are kind of like scoped down to what you have access to. So the blast radius is a lot smaller. But if you're using it like on your own projects, right, the blast radius is much faster. And one thing that like why I think it's so important, right, to focus on the fundamentals is a lot of the times like generated code misses a lot of those steps that you would traditionally think about, right? If you're writing your own code, you have to like add odd validators. And to you, that's like second-hand nature, right? You're just adding it as you're doing it. Maybe you're looking at reference code, but AI likes to skip a lot of those things, right? So that's why the part of like not just blindly prompting, but kind of like thinking about everything that needs to get done beforehand, a lot of these things. Okay, so this kind of like brings us up to sort of like how AI can do, what AI could do for you, what it could do for me, and how I have seen changed a lot of the stuff. Not a lot of the stuff, but a lot of the processes that I work with. I feel like if I were to look back about a year, maybe a year and a half ago, it was rare that like people were using AI like day to day. Right now, everybody in my team has like a subscription to Cloud Code, and that has become like the default way that we work, and it has really changed, right? And what I would like to focus is, instead of like outside, right? I think for myself, I've always had ideas, right? Like in the back of my head, like I want to build this, I want to build that. And usually the trade-off for me is time, right? Like, do I spend time not working or do I spend time doing more work? And I think for me, like having AI around has helped make that easier, right? Because I think with AI, it reduces almost everything I do, like by half, or I could be doing multiple things at once. I've gotten to the point that like I'm usually working on 3 things at the same time every single day, like 24/7, which is not good, right? It's like one of the dopamine effects of AI. Like you feel like you're supposed to be doing something all the time, and that's kind of where I want to jump into, sort of like a demo, like a little demo, like almost like a case study. So I built this app. It's like a consumer app. There's nothing fancy about it. I call it Snappy Photos, and so kind of like a story. So I built a version of this about 2-3 years ago for my wedding, and it took me like about 2 weeks to build, and it was so ugly, right? It was just like the most basic thing that I could share, and it kind of just sat there, right? And one of these, like a few weeks ago, I had the idea, like, oh, AI is like much better now than what it was 2 years ago, so let me try it again. So I was able to use that to build, basically everything, the UI, the features, the database, and it kind of like, to be honest, I kind of like touched the code very little. All I was doing was reviewing code and making sure everything was up to its standards. And if I show you guys, so basically in about a week, I was able to like get this like cool website going, and kind of like, the whole point is to make money. So trying to sell it to people, and I've been like, slowly marketing and like going to events, sharing with people. And, all of this started from an idea, right? I think if I actually really wanted to focus to this as a product, it would have taken months, right? To be able to get from something to nothing. And, let me do like cool things, right? Like I have like an affiliate program, just things that I would have never even thought about, like coupons built into it. And it's deployed. A couple people have used it already, and it works, right? And previous to AI, something like this, would have taken you months, right? It's not easy to build a product from scratch, and it's even a lot harder to put it in front of people. But if you have AI, then suddenly that barrier starts blurring, right? You can do things faster, you could be motivated, and so going forward with kind of like, like I say, I'm always building things, right? So I was like, okay, what's next, right? Like what do I want to build? And the most logical thing that I had is like, okay, how do I promote? My website, right? And again, if you're on the internet right now, one of the fastest things to do is TikTok, Instagram is usually where you can start, like almost have no money and start marketing your app, right? You're like one viral post away, right, from making a couple $100. And that takes time, right? Like you have to sit on TikTok so long, scrolling back and forth, figuring out what works, what doesn't work. And right now there's a lot of tools that kind of automate that for you. But being me, I was like, I'm not going to pay for that. I'll just build it myself, right? So that's what event led me to, I believe is this one. So I created this thing. It sucks. It's just for me, and it's called Slider Studio. So if you guys are familiar with TikTok, one of the highest performing contents on TikTok is slideshows, right? So you create a slideshow, you post it, you put a song, you put a hook, right? And you can generate crazy amounts of views to it. So I decided to build something like that, and while this looks like super ugly, it's pretty interesting behind the hood, right? So I was able to create these things, which are called collections. So I'm focused on weddings, so you see a lot of this other stuff. It's just like wedding pictures. But I did something before this, right? So something that I won't show. I also built a scraping system for Pinterest. So I scrape mad pictures from Pinterest. I have like 5 gigabytes of pictures from there. And prior to that, I would have paid like a scraper or something, or pay for one of those tools. But really, all I spent for the scraper was like about $5 for like 10 proxies. And I kind of like just scrape like a madman every time I need. So I scrape these, and where it's cool is like, so like the UI here isn't great, but really the way this works is you would select a collection, right? So I have like the coding set up, and really all I come here is like how many slides I want, right? And I can like put like slide 1, the hard truths of being a developer. And then I just do like rest slides, points that build to the slide 1. And here I just specify the slides, the pictures I use, and I just click generate slideshow. So it'll take a few, but eventually we get a slideshow, right? That I could just download into my phone. I could turn it into a video if I want. I could keep it as slideshows, and then I post on TikTok, right? And this kind of automates basically majority of the creative work, right? Where like I'm not trying to be on TikTok to go viral in every single post. I just want to let people know that I'm doing something, right? Whether it's 100 views, 200 views. Eventually, right, you get to the point where you find something that works and you just kind of like double down and put ads on it, right? And you don't even need creativity. So, right, it's pretty standard, right? So before, my process is I'd go into Pinterest, I look for these pictures by myself, I go through TikTok, I look what other people are doing, I would try to create the hooks, and then I'd spend maybe like 30, 40 minutes, right, to get a post out. And now I could just spend like 10 minutes and do like posts for like 3 days at a time, which is pretty interesting. So then I was like, okay, what's next, right? So this is where I believe it starts getting a little bit cooler. Some of the thing that trends on TikTok again right now is like characters, right? Like reactions and all of that sort of stuff. And as AI is getting stronger, so are video models. So I came up with the idea of like characters, right? So we could use some like AI models to generate really whatever character you want. So I have this girl that I call Kaylee, which is works for a lot of the content that I post on TikTok. So kind of like a multi-step process, right? So if I go back to this guy, I can kind of see how I created this image, and I can go to like characters. I can create a new character. I just give it the description. I select the model, generate it. It costs me like 5 cents, right? As opposed to like being paying like $20, $30 to somebody to do it. And it takes a little bit, but you'll see, you eventually get an image of a character, and you can do this for anything, right? Right now, my description sucks, so the character kind of looks different. So, you know, I just save it, and now I have somebody I can create videos with, which this comes in the second part, right? So once I have a character, I can create a video, and this is, I guess, kind of cool. So I could have it generate like a hook basically, right? And I'm just gonna say like coding sucks, right? So I generate hooks, and it uses some like dumb prompts that I've come up with to try to like get like what hooks are emotional and like kind of like capture people in. So it generates a hook, and you know, I'm just gonna pick this first one. I continue with the hook, and here, if I want to add like movement, so I could say character typing fast and angry. I select the model that I want, the time, and I added this like estimate, right, to see how much it costs me, just so that I keep track of costs. I let it run. It takes like about 3 minutes, and eventually you get a video back, right? And I know it seems kind of like silly, right? But like this is like a lot of the content that's like on TikTok. If you're on TikTok, like these things are getting millions of views, and there's people paying agencies like thousands of dollars to generate this kind of stuff, right? So I just decided to build it myself. You know, I don't really care that it looks nice or anything like that, but if it's the purpose that I have, right, which is trying to, you know, get my apps more attention than, you know, than otherwise they would, or I wouldn't want to pay somebody. And again, I loaded this account with like 50 bucks like 3 months ago, and it's still going on it, right? So you do start seeing the cost savings, and we'll kind of like keep talking over this, right? So there you go. You have this video with this little caption, which is which is the hook that it generated. I could drop it there. and I can just download the video, right? And that's the original video. If you want it with the words, you download it. This one takes a little bit longer because it has to burn in the images in there, but then you can just go right and post it on TikTok. And I guess this is what I'm getting to, that AI has helped unlock, right? A lot of us have ideas, have a lot of things we want to do that we otherwise wouldn't do, right? Because the barrier to entry is too high. I feel like today, you don't even need to learn how to code, right? You can just pop like a codex or whatever the heck you want, and you'll be able to build something in a few hours that you can then just slap like a Stripe link on it and get people to pay for it. And this is kind of like, right, what I feel like AI is outside of work, outside of your professional workspace. What it's starting to take us into is that it enables a lot of people to have that builder mindset, right? To be able to build stuff. I think before it was kind of like, I'm going to say like a glass ceiling, right? You had to go to college, you had to learn how to code, you had to put yourself through long periods of learning how to do stuff just to get to a point where you had something running on your own computer, right? Like not even deployed. And I think AI is like switching that, right? It's changing coding. It's not changing jobs, right? It's not changing what we do, but it's changing how fast you can do it, right? Right now, a high school student can build the same thing I built, right? Even though I have 10 years of experience. And I think that's what like the key insight of this, right? This is how it's changing coding. I think a lot of us, because we're professionals, we see it as oh, coding is bad, right? It's all these security like issues and all these problems. And then if you work at like mature organizations, you have compliance like breathing down your neck, right? You can't use this model, or like you can't do this or you can't do that. But think about it back when you were like in high school, right? In high school, I feel like you had many ideas. You had the sky was the limit, right? And I think this is where AI is like really powerful, because it can inspire people at younger ages to be able to do something that would take years to do. Dramatically lowers the barrier to becoming a builder, right? I feel like that's almost not even a barrier now, right? It's more of a like, do you just want to sit back and kind of watch other people build, or do you want to join the movement and start building? So, advice for beginners, right? I know this is not like a software engineering group or a developer group, right? Everybody has different career paths, but it's pretty easy to get started. I think a lot of these points summarized and stuff that I've mentioned through the talk, start small, use AI as a learning partner, solve real problems, right? Solve problems you have. You don't have to go out there and change the world to build something. I had a dumb idea, right? I wanted to build an app for weddings, try to make money off of it. Spent a week, I built it. I wanted to promote it, spent 3 days, built it, and it doesn't cost me much time. It doesn't bother, like I like building stuff. And I think the only way you really learn how to get past of like, I want to do something is by shipping stuff, right? If you're not shipping stuff, you're placing that limit on yourself, right? And I think right now with AI, shipping stuff is super, super simple. And like I mentioned, right, the barrier to building has never been lower, right? You can go from nothing to something in a few hours in your house in 20 bucks. There's really no excuses. Maybe I guess the money, right? If you don't have 20 bucks, you can't get as far. And there's an infinite amount of ideas to build. And we'll open up for Q&A if you guys, while you guys think of questions. My LinkedIn is there, my TikTok, my Discord, and some site I've been building. You guys find it interesting. I'm trying to teach basically all of this to like high school students so that they can learn how to build and get their first app out in a weekend.
Perfect. My name is Jorge. Nice to meet you. Thank you for the presentation. My first question is, where would you draw the line between the dependency with AI and just kind of using it for, as a personal assistant, kind of helping out? Where do you draw the boundaries?
Yeah, I think that's like a pretty personal question, right? Because your limits are different than mine, right? I myself tend to separate, right, how I use AI, right? With when I'm working, like my real job, AI use is very diligent, right? I have a lot of like rules and patterns that I follow. But when I'm just building stuff for myself, I don't care. I just kind of put it on the side and let it rip, right? But again, here's where my boundary is a lot further because I do have like 10 years of experience doing all this stuff like by hand, right? So I kind of know what goes wrong, what I need to do, right? But if you're on the opposite side of that, right, where you're barely learning, right, I do think it is against you to just let AI blindly run doing stuff that you don't know, right? Like if you don't know how to, I don't know, write a SQL statement, right? You shouldn't ask AI to just do it for you, right? Maybe you should ask it to teach you how to do it, right? So that you can start building like that. I'm going to say like muscle memory, because it is very easy, right? To like just type into AI and let it do its thing. And by the time it's done, there's like 50 files that change and you're not going to review all of them, right? So, again, I feel like if I had to do it, if you're earlier in your career, you should use it more as an assistant rather than like it's going to do my work for me. I think as you transition to that, that boundary starts pushing back because you're just more comfortable.
Perfect. Thank you. And I do have a follow-up question that leads into it. I don't know how much experience you have with that because, you've jumped from job to job, but the question would be, with AI nowadays, because, as a software developer, you have to learn a lot of languages, a lot of different stuff like you were mentioning. You go from, you have to learn Python, and if you're a Python developer, then sometimes they, got to learn Java. So with that said, during job interviews, how would you handle that? Especially if you can't really use AI. I don't think anyone uses AI when they're doing job interviews. That's not the right. They want to test your core knowledge.
Yeah.
So how do you think that's making an impact in job interviews?
Yeah. So I will say a lot of the like prior to COVID, all the job interviews were in person. So you had to go in person. You had to stop a whiteboard. You spent a whole day at a company just kind of like getting grilled on your skills. I think as COVID happened, all the companies went back to didn't go back. They started virtual interviews, and right now, I've actually been interviewing. A lot of companies are starting to fly you out again, right? Like maybe not for the entire process as before, but at least for one round of interviews, they're testing your technical abilities in person. And I think there's also a lot of like, you could argue this one both ways, but as you reach higher levels, there's a lot more emphasis on problem solving skills and system design. So while you can use AI for those, for like an experienced interviewer that's interviewing you, it is pretty easy for them to poke holes and kind of figure out when like you don't know what you don't know in a sense. So it does become harder. I do believe it's an issue because I've read a bunch of blogs about like all these companies, starting these different type of measures to try to prevent AI to cheat in companies. So, but that's it's a very interesting problem, right? And I don't think there's a solution to it, right? But I do think if you're a software engineer, right, if you want to work at a lot of companies, there's like that secret handshake you have to learn, right? You have to lead code, you have to learn like DSA, and right, you could get away without doing it, but if you really want to like earn that like big salary, you just have to do it. Like you have to like suck it up and just do it.
No, thank you.
Any other questions?
Thanks for the presentation. I think it's similar to what he asked. I'm not a software developer, but I build systems and maintain systems, and I started using AI to develop or create for me tooling or tool sets that help me automate or speed up the activities that normally I have to take me a lot of time doing manually, right? Now, my concern as being not a developer is similar to what you say. I ask the AI to generate the code, to do a function, to run an API and pull me data, filter and do the stuff, right? It generates files, it generates modules, it generates everything. And that's when things start, like, this is when I question myself, like, okay, so yeah, I tested, it runs. How much I should trust, or where do I need to start thinking like what I should be doing better, right? Because that's the risk, right?
Yeah.
AI is doing the work for you. You think that is working fine, and you think that it's doing it properly, right? And I don't know what are the suggestions there, right?
Yeah, I think my advice there would be you just have to take it a step at a time, right? I think this is the biggest culprit of AI that a lot of people just ask like a very broad thing, right? Like do X, do Y. But think about how you would do it yourself, right? If I were writing this reports, right? These are the data sets I'm looking at. These are like the methodologies for like crunching numbers that I'm using. These are like the variables and these are like the deviations and all that sort of stuff. And then just take it step at a time, right? You don't have to tell the AI like I want X report. Just go ahead and do it, right? When you do stuff like that, the margin for error becomes a lot bigger. So you kind of want to have to take that away. Now, if you want to get into the more advanced stuff, like how people are doing that, right? A lot of people use different models, right? So you might use a model to generate whatever you're trying to build, and then you use another model as a reviewer, right? If you get deeper into it, right, there's like prompts, there's like skills that you can build that help you start building those validation rules that you need, that you specifically are looking for, so that you're just not trusting like one AI agent to be correctly. You kind of have like a peer with a standard set of rules that can evaluate against it.
Awesome. Any other questions? Okay.
All right.
Thank you very much.